We live? Is everybody out there? It's Sunday night. This is our first live stream. Um, yeah, kind of crazy for us. There's going to be a lot of issues. We literally just downloaded this program this afternoon and are kind of working out the bugs. So don't hold it against us on this one. It's going to be kind of brutal, but it'll be fun in the same way, hopefully. I'm a little under the weather also. So, cut me some slack. I almost thought about canceling it, but I didn't. I really didn't want to. We didn't put out a video this morning because things have been kind of crazy and we didn't get time. So I thought this would be a I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to kind of get one of these live streams out of the way. And I'm really excited to see all the people that are here already. Um, I didn't know what to expect, honestly. So, um, give us your questions. Let's try to stick to stuff that's, easily answered for the most part, in a short frame of time. And, I thought because we really don't have a topic to discuss, I thought I would just maybe go over how we got here. You know, how did Skylabs start? And because I don't think we've really talked about that very much. And it's kind of interesting in that, in 7, 8 years ago, somewhere in there, I was doing home theater installation and doing home automation. And we were going into these really expensive homes, and people were kind of just discarding this equipment. Um, and I wasn't making a lot of money, so I decided to put a lot of it on eBay and Craigslist. And I kind of realized that, you know, there was an opportunity there, that a lot of this equipment really just needed a little bit of cleanup and it could get a new life again, maybe some capacitors, some simple maintenance things. And it turned out that, I was actually able to make more money selling the equipment on the side than I was doing the home theater and automation installation. And I had a friend of mine, maybe 20 miles west of here, in Adel, and she had a big 5,000 square foot building full of mid-century furniture. And at the time, I was getting into restoring consoles, the big, large consoles. And there was a need for it because none of the electronics repair shops in town would touch them. And so she was really nice, let me set up a little spot in the back of her space. And I sat there on my couch one day and I said, "Well, I need a name." And I said, Skylabs. It was a satellite that went up the year I was born in 73. And I liked it. So that was it. And, you know, really within being open about 6 months, I figured I was making more than and way happier doing this type of work than I was doing home theater installation and that kind of thing. So I decided to get my own space. And we still focused on the consoles mainly. We even did some custom retro modification consoles, kind of like what you're seeing up here now. And that was a lot of fun. It was really time consuming. And unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but it just turned out that the vintage audio side of it really grew legs. This is even a custom console we built from scratch. I at one point thought we were going to get into designing and manufacturing consoles. And you know, then all of a sudden the 70s stereo equipment just really took off. And being that I love that stuff just as much, it just made sense to, you know, buy, sell, restore the '70s equipment being it needed less work and everything that was involved with consoles. So I ended up getting a small space here in West Des Moines and here we are now. The last 6 years we've pretty much just or maybe 5 years, we've just been focusing on the '70s stereos. And I love it. I love my job. I love everything that's involved with it. I love watching the business grow and getting to experience all this amazing equipment that maybe I was a little bit too young for the first time it went through. And then also getting to, you know, turn the younger people onto this equipment because really, if it wasn't for them, um, I wouldn't be putting what I'm putting into this if there wasn't if there wasn't a newer crowd coming in, because it just wouldn't have any longevity. But the kids that are coming in and buying records and turntables and vintage stereo equipment, um, I think it would probably blow a lot of people's minds. I think a lot of people are under the impression that, it's just the boomers, it's the retired people that are buying this equipment. That is not true at all. Um, the kids see it, they hear it, and I don't think the vintage stereo enthusiasm is waning, at least at this point. So, just I'm excited about Skylabs. I'm excited about where it's going, and yeah, I'm knee deep in vintage audio, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. And it, just so happened that the YouTube started to take off a little bit, and it's even more fun in that I kind of get to share that experience with everybody out there that watches. So um, it's been a lot of fun, and I'm really happy. So thank you for coming on this live stream. Um, Hopefully, we're going to get to answer a lot of questions, and we should probably do that. Is my microphone is the mic loud enough for everybody? Everybody getting a good? If the microphone needs to come up or down or whatever, let us know. Like I say, we're definitely new to this whole gig, but we're going to do our best. Again, I'm not feeling the greatest. I'm a little under the weather, but it is what it is. So, um, you got a question out there? Well, where it gets that done, um, give us some questions if you got them. I know what's one of the questions we seem to get quite a bit. A lot of people ask why we don't sell online, and the truth of the matter is I've done the eBay shipping thing before, and it sucks. It's horrible. And if we were to put all of our inventory online on eBay or whatever forum there is, I really wouldn't have a need for a physical store. Everything that we sell is sourced locally and it's sold locally. And I like owning a store. I don't want to be in front of a computer just posting up pictures and descriptions of vintage electronics and then shipping them off and hope that everything goes okay. Um, I'd probably make more money doing it that way. There's no question. But there's something about the interaction and the customers that come in that it really makes it even, it makes it more enjoyable, like 100%. So I know that a lot of people are frustrated that we don't ship vintage electronics and we don't accept shipped in repairs. But the reality of it is, um, I don't think we'd have a need for a physical store at that point. It would just be data entry and all that. So that's 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 a question we get almost daily. So um, looks like we've got a question. Is your dad the bench tech? One of them. We actually have 4 techs. 2 of them work from home. My dad's here, and then Rob's here. And then I dabble, but I am no technician. Um, I can do general maintenance and stuff like that. My dad is my dad is insane. Um, he was an auto mechanic all of his life, and anything with gears. And I think it's just that generation too. So many people that are that age, they just seem so versed in everything, where he knows electronics, he knows automotive, he knows carpentry, he knows plumbing, he knows everything. And I don't know if those skills are being taught today. And it's really too bad because we're so reliant on other people at this point. But yeah, he's here. He's great. I'll He'll be here until unfortunately he can't be. So, any tips on buying from eBay and Craigslist and not getting ripped off? Well, fortunately with eBay, you get a 30-day guarantee, which is nice. And I always say my first, my first thing you do when you get that item, if it's not as described, and test it thoroughly and let it run for 8 hours, 10 hours, and make sure there's no gremlins popping up. And if there's something wrong, you immediately put in for return. Because the problem and what happens is because we have people bring stuff in and they'll say, I bought this on eBay. There's a problem with it. I want to check it in for repair. And, we're quoting 3 months turnaround time. By then, your eBay warranty is up and you're kind of holding the piece of equipment. So with Craigslist, you got to buy it right, unfortunately, because, usually those are, buy it and done. That's it. It's over. You own it. So, my best suggestion for vintage audio online is eBay and buy it from a reputable seller. So, what do you like particularly about the G series of sound? Um, I think, I think Pioneer and Sansui really hit their stride there in 77. I think they kind of got away from the more warmer sounding rolled off sound that they had for a long time and really went to a clinical, those G series Sansuis excuse me, those G series Sansuis, they punch, I mean they hit you. And I I am not an audiophile type at all where I I like to stretch the legs on my stereo. I've gone into audiophile shops before and, kind of gotten carried away and had the salesman or the owner come by and turn it down on me. But I kind of want to hear what it can do. I don't listen to loud music all the time, but when I want it to be loud, I want it loud and I want it to sound good. And I think that Sansui stuff, the G series especially, it's really forward and I like it. But then again, I wouldn't want it to be my only receiver. I like having multiple units that do, different things better than other things. I don't think there's one amplifier, one set of speakers out there that does everything perfectly, unfortunately, at least for me. I've got several different systems because they cater themselves to different genres of music better than others. And I think that's what gets a lot of us into trouble where, you know, I, it's almost like dating. You always try combining the best things from every person that, you dated, and it's just not possible. So you got to pick one and you got to pick one that does the best, Um, oh, see, and that's not right. Well, nice thing is you can have multiple stereos. There you go, and, you won't get in trouble by the other one. What is your current primary system in your home? It rotates a lot. Um, right now right now I've got the AU 20,000, the Sansui with, the JBL Jubals, but I'm ready for a change already, and I don't know, I'll probably go to tubes. I seem to I don't know. There's something about Bing Crosby's Christmas album on tubes, so I might break out my Fisher 800 and the AR3s, but, yeah, currently the AU 20,000 is what I'm running, and I love that amplifier. It it's just really nice. Off topic, but is Fix My Duel still there? Yes. Saw Bill, maybe a couple weeks ago, and, he's busy as ever. So, and I've had several customers that stopped here on the way there. Bill's awesome. Are you having good luck with spelling the Weem product? Selling the sorry. I barely graduated high school, so my reading is pretty bad. Anyway, um, yeah. I mean, they're not like it's tough to compete with Amazon, stuff like that we sell. I look at it kind of like a way for people to buy something that they're already planning on buying and supporting the channel. At the same time, I'm not trying to compete with Amazon and Best Buy and Black Friday sales. That's insane. You just can't do it. There's no way. But fortunately, there's people out there that like shopping local. They like keeping the money in the community. They like what we do, and they just want to support us. And it's a way for them to get something that they need or want and support us at the same time. And that's why we sell stuff like Weem products, because there's better ways to make money. Very little margins on that stuff. Do that was one. I should read it. Do you worry about running out of vintage equipment to sell? And I think that was the first question somebody asked me when I said that I was quitting my job and selling vintage electronics full time. It hasn't slowed down yet, you know? Like I say, we source everything locally. Everything walks in the door. I haven't left the store to buy a piece of equipment in years. I used to go to thrift stores and, um, you know, estate sales, all that kind of thing, and I haven't had to. It comes in the door pretty regularly, and it comes in good shape. At some point, obviously, it's gonna be an issue, but as of right now, it hasn't stopped and it hasn't slowed down, so I think we're good for a while, fortunately. Do you get young customers seeking out cassette tapes or 8-track tapes? Every once in a while, we get somebody in wanting a cassette deck, very rarely, and I usually recommend, the Akai deck, the new one. I think it's TIAC. It's like a $450 deck, and, if you're gonna get into cassettes, unless you've got somebody that likes working on cassette decks and knows how to work on them really well, it could be an issue. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of plastic gears, a lot of things to break, belts, all that kind of thing. I don't know, like I say, we've got 5 techs here. None of them want to work on decks. They're time consuming. They're expensive. Customers really don't want to pay a lot for a cassette deck repair. And so it's one of those, if it's not going to be a win-win for the customer and the tech, then we're not doing it. And that's why we don't do it. That's another thing we hear quite a bit, and that, um, why don't you work on this or why don't you work on that? And, you know, I want to stand behind what we repair, and I want to make sure that we're good at what we repair. We get very, very little amount of pieces that come back. It does happen. These are 50-year-old, pieces of equipment, a lot of them, but um, the more we familiarize ourselves with the same units over and over and over, we get to see a pattern. We can diagnose them quicker. And so, when you're in business, and this is there's a lot easier ways to make money than operating a vintage stereo store. Trust me. But we love it, and that's why we do it. But we got to be able to pay the bills too. And so that's the bottom line. Um, Ever tried pairing vintage receivers and modern speakers and vice versa? All the time. Yeah. Vintage receivers, modern speakers. So, a lot of the modern speakers, they like getting down there as far as ohms go. You know, I've had a lot of speakers that will clip out an amplifier, even though, the amplifier is stable to 4 ohms and, the speakers are rated at 6. You start pushing them hard and it'll click the relay out. I've had it happen with a Sansui G5000. Just off the top of my head, that's one I remember, and a set of modern Polks. And so they're not always the best pairing going from a vintage amplifier receiver and a modern set of speakers because a lot of those modern speakers are power hogs. And but again, it also depends on what your goal is. If are you wanting to get the cops called on you? Are you wanting to get those high SPLs? Then it's definitely an issue. If you're planning on moderate listening levels, then it might not be an issue for you at all. So that's one thing people forget about the goal. They're always worried about the specs, but the specs really only matter if your goal is to achieve really high SPLs and other things like that. But anyway, that's kind of an off the topic. What do you think about Magnepan speakers? Um, I've only heard a couple pairs and I like them. I like speakers that move air more. For me, I like the punch in the gut type of speaker, and Magnepans don't give me that feeling. It's kinda different. It's kinda like electrostatics too, Martin Logan's and things like that. And it's not again, that's just my opinion on what I like. It doesn't mean that, um, they're not amazing or that to somebody that likes different kinds of music than I do, which is a lot, that they don't they're not amazing speakers. So, um, I really shouldn't even have an opinion on them because I've never owned a pair. Hearing them at a demo room for 2 or 3 minutes doesn't give me a right to really have an opinion on them, to tell you the truth. Um, Thoughts on Discogs? Uh, Not a lot. I wish it was easier to catalog music, especially most of my records don't have barcodes on them. So, going through the dead wax and finding, exactly which pressing it is and all that. Wow. Um, that's a lot of work. But as far as selling on Discogs, again, it's kind of like buying a vintage receiver on eBay. When you get it, you better look it over, make sure it's as described, because otherwise, you own it. So, any advice on a novice looking to recap a 70s amplifier? Um, well, I'll give you one tip, and this is something I learned a long time ago, and it saves me a lot. And that is always grab a marker, Sharpie, what have you, and go through the capacitors and put a dot on the right side of the board, somewhere on the physical board itself, and then put a dot on the can of the capacitor, indicating that it's on the same side of the board as you marked. That way, if the polarity is off when you remove them, because here's the thing, a lot of silk screening on boards is not correct. And this is all brands. And so even if they label plus and minus on the silk screen on the board, it can be wrong. But if you only do one capacitor at a time, and when you pull that capacitor out, that dot indicates that the polarity was this way when you pulled it out of the board, it's gonna be correct as long as it was working before. Especially, if it was a factory installed capacitor, it's been working for 40 years already, then that silk screen is wrong, and you need to go off of how it was working. But, I mean, there's a lot of tutorials and, like, Blue Glow Electronics and, the guy up in Canada, I'm drawing a blank now, but he's incredible too. There's a lot of great YouTube channels on that stuff. Man, I wish. Hey, Bruce. Bruce is, I think he's out east of here towards Iowa City, maybe. Great customer. Him and his wife, they're awesome. I wish I could have Iggy here. Yeah. Um, Thank you. Yeah, thank you guys. You know, um, it's kind of hard to put into words, honestly. The appreciation I get from everybody's feedback. That again, I'm just some guy in Iowa that has a little business here, and you guys really, you are incredible at showing your appreciation for the channel and the business, and I can't thank you enough. I really can't. Um, do you need a high end cartridge for a good vinyl experience? Well, define high end. You know what I mean? I mean, everybody's got a different opinion on high end. High end cartridge to me is, $300 to $500, and $300 to $500 cartridge to some people is, that's nothing. There's $15,000 cartridges out there. Um, I do think diminishing returns does kick in pretty quick. I would say a baseline would be $100. Honestly, I think like a Grado Green or Ortofon Red would be like the baseline. And then, you know, like I say, diminishing returns. You start, does a $1,000 cartridge sound $900 better than $100 cartridge? Maybe not to me, maybe to you, but that's up to you. Familiar with them? I'm not. Column twos. From I'm really vintage, and those could be vintage speakers. I'm just not familiar with them. But yeah, unfortunately, that stuff from the 90s and 2000s, I'm just not familiar with all. What are the average length of time a piece of vintage equipment stays on your shelves? Well, it depends. Some stuff stays quite a while. We've got a tube amplifier, I think, is going on a couple years, and I do think there's a theory on that though, and that is if people can't see the tubes, and because I don't leave it running all the time because it is tubes, and I don't want to take the life away from the tubes, it's hard to demonstrate. If somebody comes in and they say, I'm looking for a tube amplifier, well then I can go over and turn it on and let it warm up for 20 minutes and then play it for them. But excuse me. Some stuff turns over. I mean, like Pioneer 780s, Marantz, any of the 22 line, Sansui, anything, that stuff turns over quick. It's stuff like kind of a Toshiba, even though the Toshiba might be just as good as the Marantz, the Sansui. Sometimes they can sit around a little bit longer because people aren't coming in the door necessarily looking for a specific Toshiba receiver from the 70s. It's the same thing with speakers. A lot of times we get, kind of smaller brand speakers that would probably be better than the big brand speakers that we're selling. But when you have to educate people when they walk in the door and, tell them that, this is a really good speaker company, they sound incredible, but they don't know because they've never heard the brand name. It's harder to sell. I can pretty much leave Klipsch, JBL, like Pioneer HPM 100s, the big names. I can leave them in the back room and put the more esoteric or the less common speakers on the floor, because I'll have somebody come in and ask for a pair of HPM 100s. I don't even need to put them on the floor. So, any thoughts? Yeah, every pair I've ever heard sounded amazing. I haven't had a ton, but every every mission speaker I've ever heard sounds really good. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it, man. Dan D. And thank you, Eric. Holy cow. Just got a pair of 1986 La Scalas, listening from classical to heavy metal through vinyl and lossless streaming. Oh, well, you don't need a lot of power, obviously. I think those are like 103 dB efficient. So, I actually know people that run those off of headphone amplifiers, 3 watts, 4 watt. Um, it just depends. It, I like hybrid. I do. I like I like the speed of the solid state stuff, and I like the tube preamp for kind of the warmth and the the distortion, for lack of a better word. But the nice thing about La Scalas, you can run them on anything. So I think it would just come down to your budget, what you like, brand name, all of it. But again, most clips, you don't have to worry about what amplifier you buy. It's going to drive it no problem. I think that's why Klipsch has such a big following. And they're a great company too. Rare isn't always valuable or desirable. 100%. A lot of times things are too rare. I turn down equipment quite a bit because, unfortunately, the customer that bought it, bought it for retail. And I'm sure it's really nice equipment and it's made really well. But once again, from a business standpoint, you want stuff on your floor that people walk in the door looking for. And you don't have to necessarily educate them on the brand and the build quality and things like that. They've already read about it online. They already know that, Pioneer, Sansui, Marantz, Yamaha, all those brands are good, reputable brands with a lot of parts out there. That's another thing. Sourcing parts for really rare is a lot harder than sourcing parts for really common. So that's definitely correct. Any advice on how to stop buying more vintage gear? I think I have a problem. We all do. You have no idea how many times I have to check myself, it happens all the time. But yeah, I don't it's a great addiction, in my opinion. It really is. And really for the last 10 years, you should be making money on your addiction if you're in vintage audio. And I'm not saying that's why you should get into vintage audio. That's not why I got into vintage audio, was to make money on selling the gear in the future, because that could change tomorrow. But it seems like the last 10 years, you've probably done well with any purchases. So I have a lot of vintage gear. How often should you run your unit to ensure caps and such stay functionally correct? I'm really I'm in the leave it on as much as possible camp, but I don't know. I think this would probably be a better question for Rob. You know, I don't obviously leave all mine on all the time because I have too many. Some of them sit and I don't listen to them enough. I don't get them rotated out enough. But yeah, I think we'd have to ask Rob to get into the technicals on how often you should do that. Who do you source pots and switches from? Usually Mauser or DigiKey. Usually the majority, if we're looking for a pot that can't be replaced, eBay, unfortunately. That's a question we get a lot. Where can I get this part from? Where can I get that part from? eBay. That's it. We're all kind of in the same boat. My eBay account has saved searches for, Kenwood meters that I'm waiting to pop. I'm waiting for somebody to post up, and I'm going to pay the piper for them because they're kind of rare. They're VU meters, but I need them. Yamaha volume pots, stuff like that. You're just there's nothing really much you can do about it but sit and wait. So unfortunately, I don't have a better answer for those. Love them. I mean, here's the thing, I love them, but I wouldn't recommend them to everybody. Cerwin Vegas are kind of, I hate to say it, but they're kind of a one trick pony, in my opinion. They do loud SPLs, big bass, maybe better than a lot of other speakers. But, you know, I don't think I don't think it's a speaker you want to buy if you listen to, 90% of the music you listen to is classical and you're wanting to discuss the finer points of the cello. The Cerwin Vega is not going to be your go-to speaker. You want to listen to AC/DC and hip hop, get Cerwin Vegas. You know, you want to relive your dorm life, and I'm not bagging on them. I love them, but they're just not a well-rounded speaker, in my opinion. So, could you leave a big receiver on all the time? Sure, why not? The only the only the only electronics that I don't leave on all the time are tubes. If I've got a tube amplifier, or because I just don't want to put the life on them. But I, and this isn't, I've talked to a lot of people. I've asked a lot of technicians the same question, and it really comes down to your electronics are better having a low amount of voltage going through them. Rather than constantly putting voltage into a capacitor and then draining it and then doing the same thing. A lot of modern electronics don't even fully shut down. They go into a hibernation mode. And so, do you have a preferred RCA cable? One that works. And I hate to say that, but honestly, buy the best cable you can afford for your budget. I'm not in the expensive cable world. It doesn't I know my limitations. My bottleneck is my listening room, and until I get that figured out and addressed and treated, there's no point in me buying really expensive cables that I don't think I'm gonna be able to hear the difference in, because I've got so many limitations with my HVAC system and, standing waves, reflections. I mean, there's just my room sucks right now, and we don't plan on being in our house forever. So I don't really want to put a bunch of time into it. And, that's just the reality of it. So hopefully one day I've got a room that's treated and, sounds great. And I'm in a place where I can buy some cables that I think I'd be able to hear the difference in. It's just right now, not reality. That's really it. But buy good quality cables. What do you think of UHQR recordings? I think what Chad does um, is incredible. I think that with a UHQR recording, in my opinion, what you're buying is you're buying consistency. In that, if you buy, let's say they put out, just a normal pressing record, they're not doing a lot of quality control, and somebody says, "Man, that record sounds great. It's flat as a pancake. There's no pops or clicks. It's dead quiet." Well, and maybe he got a pressing in the first 500 of the run, and you get one and it's the 20th, way down the line of the pressing, and it's snap, crackle, pop, hiss, and it just sounds bad. Buying a UHQR, I think what they're doing is they're making sure that you're only getting a quality pressing of it, because they're checking the runs so often. So yeah, I think it's all about, I think what you're buying is quality control. And I'm okay with that. I really am. I'm not saying that some of those UHQRs don't sound incredibly better than other ones, but I wouldn't that wouldn't be the only reason I would purchase a UHQR or one step or a deluxe edition. I think it's kind of, you're taking out the risk of getting a bad copy. I think is more what it is. But, you know, again, that's just my opinion. What was a DC power amp? Well, a lot of times DC means direct coupled. Again, this would be a question for Rob, but yeah, it's a power. Well, it's coupled by a capacitor. The output stage is, but Rob would be able to answer that a lot better than I will. Does Recone speakers change sound? I don't know, honestly. We do a lot of refoaming. I use we use another company to do recones because literally what I can buy the recone kit for, they will do the recone and provide the kit. So there's no point in us doing them. I mean, I'm sure they would. If you think about, like Pioneer HPM 100s, the one with the masonite, or maybe it's not masonite, it's a plasticky cone, and they don't make those anymore. So I mean, it might change the resonance. I'm sure it would to some degree. Would that be audible to the average person? I don't know. I've never AB'd an original speaker with a reconed speaker, I guess. Working on tube amplifier is dangerous as it can be. I mean, some of those those capacitors, yeah, you don't want to mess around with tube amplifiers if you don't know what you're doing at all. I don't like getting in those things. They'll light you up like a Christmas tree. Solid state's different, but and unfortunately tube amplifiers are easier to work on because a lot of them are point-to-point wiring. So it's kind of a catch-22. But yeah, sorry. I just, unless you really know what you're doing, I would not go poking your fingers inside of a tube amplifier. If you were to tour your showroom, specifically the receiver wall, it would be fun to see what is currently on hand, even though it changes day to day. We were doing, and I'm sorry if we haven't done a shop sweep. We were doing them once a month, I think. Just a quick 1-minute video, but maybe you're wanting to see more in detail, and we'll do that. It is hard because, especially right now, being the holiday season, the inventory just rotates. I mean, it goes fast. There's stuff that doesn't even make it 5-6 hours out there. When you have time at home to listen to some tunes, are you listening to your Jubals? I right now I've been listening to my Jubals for a while, but I've got 3 or 4 sets of speakers. I said 3 or 4, Eric. You're not gonna that get rotated out quite a bit. The L65s, the 810 ADSs, my AR3s, and then I just picked up a pair of Monitor Silver 100s, and I like those a lot. So, but I guess I got 3 that I really listen to quite often. Those get the major rotation. How good are Onkyo amplifiers like that? I don't really get into them. Are those the ones with the big meters on it? I guess I'm asking a screen and you can't reply. I'm sorry. I think those are the ones with the big meters on them, and they look incredible. I'm sure they're well made. It's just our cutoff for repair is 1980, and so I'm just not familiar with them that much. That's up to you. How much is it going to cost, or can you do it yourself? And how much is it worth to you? Some people, they might have sentimental value in some things, and they're willing to dump insane amount of money into a piece that's worth $100. And then other people might see just the value of the receiver or what you could get a working one for, and don't want to spend any more than that. And I don't think either one's right or wrong, but that's only a question you can answer yourself, in my opinion. And I think we got time for a couple more, and then we'll have to wrap up. But I feel like finally kind of getting the swing of things a little bit here. So thank you guys for being a part of this first one. and it will get better. We'll get better at this. Everything, it's hard to do these things the first time because you don't know what to expect. I mean, it's like saying, okay, you're going to sit here and you're going to talk into this microphone. And I didn't go to school for communications or anything like that. I have no idea what I'm doing. And just answering questions. So anyway, thank you guys again for being so supportive. Um, have you had experience with the 800 solid state receiver? I think we've had some of those. I'm pretty sure we have. I'm not a big fan of late 70s solid state equipment much at all, though. Personally, they've got a bad track record too. They're what I seem to see, because I see repair bills all the time. Even if I'm not the one doing the repair on it, which I'm usually not, um, you start to see similarities and problems where the technicians can't find germanium transistors, or parts are unavailable, or schematics are terrible, they don't have voltages on them, and any one of those problems can render a piece of equipment pretty much unrepairable, at least for a moderate repair price. So I try and stay away from the late 60s solid state stuff. 60s tubes, mid to late 70s solid state. So what do you think about using a power strip to turn? I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I mean, again, maybe an engineer would have a reason to take warning to that, but um, you're just shutting the power off. So I don't think it's a big deal, but don't quote me on that, or actually you can quote me on it. Just don't hold me liable. Do you think any ops sound good? I don't know. Don't know the answer to that one. Thanks for taking the time. Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Terry. I appreciate it. Um, Thank you for coming on here and listening to me. I appreciate that. I think you should do it again. Well, thank you, Rick. Thanks. Rick's awesome. Rick comes in the shop quite a bit. Rick's a good dude. But yeah, I appreciate you all coming on here. Thank you. I mean, really, thank you so much. We'll do this again. Hopefully it'll be better next time. But hopefully it didn't bore you to tears. And thank you for the super chats that I kind of missed them. I'm really sorry. But it's more just, I don't really even know where to look right now. I'm kind of just looking at the screen. So if you did give us a super chat, thank you. I'm serious. I lost track of it, but I appreciate it. Um, and yeah, thanks for joining. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again, hopefully soon. Thanks.